Alright, here we are with the game Frankie versus myself. So Frankie's just setting up his Thunderfire cannon in the round ruins. There's not much line of sight there, as I'm sure many of you have played with that lovely piece of Warhammer Fantasy terrain. The mission is 4 objectives. One of the objectives in with the Thunderfire cannon there, and the other 3 are the black circles in sort of the middle of the board there. Dawn of War and not Hammer and Anvil, sorry, Big Guns Never Tire is in play. So we have a scoring Thunderfire, scoring Skyray, and some scoring broadsides. So basic general army concept here is bikers versus Tau. Bikers have got some space wolf support with the couple drop pods, 2 rune priests with jaws, grey hunters, wolf guard, tactical marines, and 5 scouts just for giggles, along with that Thunderfire cannon as well. And we've got Khan on a bike, so there will be some scouting going on, and a Chooser of the Slain to limit my infiltration. Sort of a similar Tau list to what I've been playing for quite a while now. Double Riptide, Farseer as allies, 2 jet bikes, 5 warp spiders, then broadsides, crisis suits. Commander with weapons and penship, then the command and control node and multi-spectrum sensor suit is in the crisis suit unit, 1 big unit of Kroot, normal size Kroot unit, small fire warrior squad. So a bit light on the scoring, as quite common with the sort of list these days, and we'll go into a bit of that later, but that's the way you beat those lists, focusing on that. And then we've got 2 main firepower units with the crisis suits and broadsides, along with the riptides to back that up. So Frankie has won the roll-off to go first and choose table side, and as we'll discuss, I think he's chosen the wrong table side here. What happens is he'll scout up 12 inches to put as much pressure on me as possible. I'll be using my Kroot as much as I can, with the Chooser of the Slain being put in the middle to limit his scout moves onto my Riptides. The top left bike, the unit that Frankie's pointing at the moment, has the Jaws Rune Priest, and one obviously is going to be coming in on a drop pod. So I want to limit the amount of grab and jaws that he can get onto my Riptides and Broadsides, because those are the units that are very vulnerable to it, because I do not have drones on any of those units, so they're going to be wounding on 2s. And obviously they're AP2 as well. He's got first turn, so I'm not going to be able to get up any 4-up invols. I did roll a 4-up invol for my psychic power on the Farseer, or my 3-up invols on the Riptides. So that's going to be pretty hard to stop if he hits me and rolls really well with that. So what we'll see as I start deploying is I'll be looking to limit the amount of firepower that he can bring to bear against those units. Right now he's measuring his 18-inch bubble range for his Chooser of the Slain, so that's where my Kroot cannot infiltrate. And obviously when you put that in the center, that limits a lot of what the Kroot can do. Now I'm just meandering around, having a pontificate about what I want to do. That central piece of terrain is what's going to be very important, because for the most part the bottom level is all wall. There's no windows, there's only one door, which you can sort of see on the central left there, where that little stair comes down. There's a doorway there. From that perspective, that's the only little bit that you can see through at a basic infantry level. Obviously the Riptides and the tanks can sort of see through the second level and down towards something, but this is why I think Frankie should have taken the side that I'm deploying on, particularly given that he had the option for that, because when he scouts, he can come into that area and limit the amount of shooting that I can get. Remembering as well that I'm trying to, as we'll see in a minute when I start measuring things out to put my Riptides in the corners, my Riptides don't want to be in the center of the line because he'll be able to bring the majority of his grab guns in range with that scout move that he has, and with the Chooser of the Slain stopping me from infiltrating further out to limit his capacity to get closer to me, not only through scouting, but also through having my other guys further out to limit his ability to maximize that 18-inch range. Same goes with the Jaws. I want those Riptides in a place where it's going to be more difficult for him to use both of his Jaws and really only have one. So here I am measuring those Riptides into the corners. So if he had deployed upon my side, that would have been greatly reduced the capacity for me to steal the initiative and crush his army before he was able to do anything. That was a lovely spoiler alert, by the way, but given that we've had this game up for a while now, I'm assuming most of you know how it ends, and if you don't, sorry. So yeah, if he deployed upon my side, he would have been able to use that piece of terrain to minimize the amount of damage that I could have done. And in this case, yes, it's 1 out of 6, but that's a 1 out of 6 chance that you could really have avoided while still having that very high likelihood of you having that 5 out of 6 chance of doing very well on that first turn. It might have limited your ranges a little bit on that first push, but that's where also the drop pods come in, because the Wolf Guard that he has all have Combi Plasma as well. So he would have really been able to get quite a bit of damage going into those broadsides and or Riptides with the Grav, with the Jaws, and with the deep striking units if he had swapped the table side still, whilst also protecting a little bit against the opportunity for me seizing. So here I am putting my Riptides in that bottom corner that's just outside of range of the grab guns at the moment, but it is leaving both of those Riptides quite vulnerable to a Jaws attack coming in on a drop pod from that back line of mine, which I really should be clogging up, but I don't actually do. So we do see Frankie put a drop pod in that area later, but it's not the drop pod with the Rune Priest at that point. So here I am at the moment going, yes, I should put these here. We've got my Crisis Suit team with the Commander and the Marker Drones. So the majority toughness of that unit, or majority save, sorry, is a 4-up. So from that perspective, the grab guns are quite a bit less effective against it, but the Thunderfire, with its barrage status now, is a lot better at. So I'm gonna have everyone touch area terrain, and then spread these guys out over here, and then I start thinking, let's try and get a bit as fancy as possible so he can't do any focus fire stuff. Really, when at the beginning, should have left them where they were. They were all still going to get a cover save. I could have been passing those saves off with the Iridium armor, and it would have stopped any pod coming in from that area and jawsing both my Riptides, or it would have limited its capacity to do that. He really would have had to have rolled a hit to get that done. So now I'm deploying my broadsides. Again, we want to be very conscious of the capacity for Jaws and all of the grab guns to wipe that unit out very quickly. Unfortunately, I really forget to pre-measure the Jaws capacity of the Rune Priest in the top left there. So it is the very top left bike that is the Rune Priest. So 36 inches is probably going to be pretty hard for me to avoid that completely while still not giving up the board control that I need. Add in as well that it's got the extra 12 inches from the next movement. I'm not going to do that, but we want to make it so that I'm not having them all lined up where he can hit them all, and that's sort of exactly what I've done. I'm now infiltrating my Kroot just to make double sure that those Riptides are protected. and limiting the scout opportunities sort of in that direction. So I'm strong siding this side of the table quite a bit. Given that the objectives are in the middle and that the White Scars army can come at me quickly, jam me up, and then leave with hit and run quite reliably, we don't want them, I guess, really to be able to hit and run in that area. We want to drag them out whilst being able to then come back in ourselves for that center part of the board. That probably won't happen because he will be able to then really just sort of assault into my backfield and pin me there and force me to the board edge closest to the camera if the game had continued on. So just walking around and taking pictures now, where remember the Thunderfire cannon is in there, and now we're going for the scout moves, just measuring out where he can get to. So obviously you cannot scout within 12 inches of the opponent. So while he's doing this, really all the scout move is putting more pressure on me. So if he comes up, first turn, done his scout move, moves again, he's right up on top of me. There's nothing really in my army that's going to assault with a great deal of force. Obviously I have the commander who has hit and run, so I can move him when and where it's needed to go into someone and then come out again. But nothing's really going to go into Marines from the Tau side of the army and actually win outside of the Riptides. But even then, they're only coming in with 4 attacks on the charge. When you count in weapon skill, they're only getting 2 hits. So 2 of them charging a small bike squad, reasonable chance, but within They Shall Know No Fear, they need to fail that leadership check to actually let them free, and if not, they'll just stay in combat, hopefully from the White Scars player, stay in combat for their turn, and then stay in combat, or sorry, not stay in combat their turn, pop back out for their turn obviously, and then someone else will get back into combat with them. So I have lacked in my shooting. So here we are going and doing stupid stuff. More pictures. Again, White Scars are just pushing up to put more pressure on my army. And here's me basically wanking with the dice and rolling a 6. So what we have at this point, because we have swapped, or not swapped table sides, but he's using a table side that I don't think he should use, really because he wanted to deploy that Thunderfire where I couldn't get to it. I now have a lot more capacity to start shooting him. So what we'll see first with the Riptides, as they start to move up, well, I'm doing my second powers first. The Rune Priest is in range, so it's denying powers. As the Riptides move up, they can see a lot more. Where they are now, they can easily see that bottommost squad and part of the central squad, but if the roles had been reversed, they really wouldn't be able to see a lot. They'd be able to see whatever they could through that door, and given that I'd be trying to put them in a corner, they wouldn't have the best vantage point from that door, and that's what would really limit and restrict my firepower, and I'd be relying a lot more on the smart missile systems, which don't need to see obviously, and whatever mobility I can get out of my crisis suit unit, and potentially obviously the broadsides as well. If I can get all those marker drones in to see, I'm happy then to move those broadsides because I can up their snap firing ballistic skill. Even if I get to ballistic skill 2 with twin length, that's quite a significant amount of hits, which is nice. So Kroot moving up again just to have that protection capacity, stopping the bikes from getting in and jamming the rest of my army. What I wanted to do with these Kroot here as much as possible is try and focus fire on the Rune Priest, but unfortunately when we get to that point I have one that I shouldn't have fired with that had given the Rune Priest 4-up cover from the ruins there. Obviously I shouldn't have done that because it only has a 5-up cover save compared to the 4-ups for the White Scars, and just having a couple of sniper shots go into him might get a bit lucky and get some rending, but Otherwise, that Kroot shield is moving up. It's got the 4-up invul on it. That was successful, but my my guide in prescience was not. And then just making sure that I've got a bit more room to wiggle around with, but we're not, again, plugging that drop pod gap back near my broadsides and Skyray. So here go the Riptides. So they're just moving to get a better vantage point. They're very safe from the grav guns at the moment now because that Kroot wall has moved up. So they only have an 18-inch range, so as long as I'm really 18.5 inches from the back of the Kroot, I don't really have any worry from those grav weapons. It's again now going to be about the drop podding Rune Priest, and because that other Rune Priest really wasn't in the center of the board, I know my Riptides are quite safe from its jaws. My broadsides aren't, but my Riptides are at the moment. So just going and seeing what I can with my broadsides at the moment, so just counting what I can see, what the smart missiles will need to kill off, and what the heavy missiles can basically have a poke at. And that's where that doorway is coming in. But just from those broadsides, I can only see about 3 of that central squad, which includes Khan. Obviously, Khan should not have been put near that doorway. There's an agent having a look, thank you very much. Again, if he'd been on the other side, my Riptides would be having a very difficult time right now to see a vast majority of what the rest of his army actually is. As it is now, the furthest one can basically see both squads, and the one closest to the camera can see both squads and probably a little bit of the furthest squad, when that really shouldn't be coming into play. So Warp Spiders are moving now as well. They're just one of those units I think a lot of people forget about, particularly in this army, because they're only 5 strong. You know, 10 strength 6 shots, strength 7 if you're I3 or a vehicle, but they're annoying as hell because it gives me another option as the Tau player to throw something into you, jam you, and then hit and run out. And that's where I find they're the most useful for this army, not as a fast harassing unit or an extra unit strength 7, but of actually being able to give me some options in combat. So here we go, Overheat was passed for the first Riptide. I'm going with him first for some odd reason, just to, I guess, see what we can do before hitting with my marker lights, which is in reality a mistake. That was just me being too eager to go, oh yes, here I go with my Riptides. So, going with the marker drones now. The crisis suits are going to be shooting at the unit which I have less line of sight to, because the Kroot obviously have quite a bit of line of sight, so does the Riptide. So they're going to see if they can knock a couple wounds off Khan. So this is the marker lights first. So that's 4 hits, and then we're going away with the missile pods at the moment. That's, I guess, one of the main reasons as well why I like that unit is when you need to, you've got 3 individual and quite reliable strength 7 sources of firepower. So they twin linked and ignore cover from the Shashfir, and then if you need to start focusing on tanks as well, you can get the pen chip to give them tank hunters. That's quite reliably getting rid of 3 tanks, depending obviously upon the AV. Not so much of an issue here, but that commander and that unit gives a lot of flexibility to the rest. So there the Riptide goes, ignores cover, ups its ballistic skill, whacks everyone dead. 1 guy left. We'll leave him be at the moment. Normally, I guess, really, I should have gotten the rest of my crew to go at him now, just to get rid of him, which would have been nice, and Khan takes another wound as well. Just showing Frankie at the moment the marker light and ignores cover, just to be safe. from this point on, it's basically me putting as much firepower as I can into everything. That was me just checking the range on battle focus. With the warp spiders, they didn't get in range with that, so they're just spreading out. Now we're doing the Kroot on the Rune Priest. No dramas. So before I got interrupted by myself or sidetracked, the rest of this phase basically nets me Khan and that central bike squad. The lone biker fails his leadership test but rallies as a Space Marine does, gets back in it and goes nuts. And then we have the drop pods starting to come in. That drop pod in the back near the Skyray and Broadsides lands. We have the Jaws Rune Priest on the bike come around as well, and they do a bit of damage there, but really not a whole lot to impact the effectiveness of that unit for the rest of the game. The Broadsides are now going to be shooting at that unit in the middle. The other Rune Priest comes down in a pod near where the two Riptides are, and he's able to get a line on both. But because of the way that he deployed, I'm able to focus fire with my Broadsides, ignore 3 or 4 of the Wolf Guard, and then put enough wounds on the unit, along with the Riptides as well, once they do their intercept, such that the Rune Priest has 1 wound left and there's only 2 Wolf Guard left. The Rune Priest then perils, double 6, and dies. So quite a bit lucky there on my behalf, but using the focus fire mechanic, I was able to limit the amount of ablative wounds that the Rune Priest had. So there's another lovely practical application of what Matt has been talking about with that. Really good ways to utilize that when you think about it, because normally you wouldn't say 7 Space Marines and a Rune Priest with 2-up armor is going to fall easily. So there goes the rest of that bike squad. So again, having that simple flip around from me seizing and being on this side rather than the other side drastically turns the game to the point where it's really a whitewash in my favor. If Frankie had been sort of in that building using the walls to protect himself, it would have been a very different story, and I might not even have seized because I didn't have the capacity to do enough damage. Anyways, thanks guys for listening, and we'll get some actual full battle reports up at a later date.